So my session this morning is going to be really as to what the faculty do to support you as either a trainee or a qualified ACP within the region, and understanding kind of the role of Health Education England generally. It's often a kind of group that's often mentioned, but often people don't quite understand how it works, or particularly how it works in terms of the training that's received. The outcome, really, what we're trying to do today is to try and introduce Health Education England as an organisation and the Centre for Advancing Practice, and what happens in terms of the setup from there. And then really understanding a little bit what we might do as the Northwest Faculty for Advancing Practice, and the support that we can offer you, both through your training and after qualification, some of the governance that surround advanced clinical practice. And then really kind of once you're qualified, what happens then? What is the support and what should be happening further on? I'm not necessarily on this session going to be directly talking a lot about supervision, because that's a session that's going to be in one of the breakout sessions later on this afternoon. So, you know, there are a lot of areas from that we would be able to talk about, but it's going to be slightly changing a little bit. Okay, well, Health Education England really is a kind of is a certain organisation that's an arm's length body that works in conjunction with the NHS to actually really just be able to facilitate the funding of training opportunities across all of the sort of medical specialties. It's really there to be able to answer population needs. So where there are certain areas where either geographically or particular sort of events, for example, obviously as COVID in the last few years of what's happened, Health Education England there is to try and grow the workforce and develop the workforce and educate them to be able to sort of satisfy what, you know, the needs of the population. And a lot of that really is the fact that actually we are, if you like, connected to the NHS and connected to the government agencies. And so what happens from that is that obviously as policy changes, as politics changes, as a government may change and how that changes, that's where these sorts of ideas sort of come through, and we're here to try and facilitate and create that. For example, obviously the comments a few years ago about having 50,000 extra nurses, what we're looking to do is we're helping being part of that solution to try and answer that. And who knows what happens in the future, or whether politics changes, or whether there's a change for what would happen. Health Education England there is to help develop that. And in answering this is that where the expansion of advanced clinical practice has changed over the last few years, and that recognition of the benefits that you as an advanced clinical practitioner bring, and also the fact that then, you know, understanding that where we're going to be able to be more powerful and more influential within the workforce, Health Education England is the opportunity to fund and support that training to go forwards, and really that's where we come in. As Annabella mentioned earlier on, we're in a period of transition where we're going to be merging back in with the NHS. Previously, it was like that a few years ago, then there was a split. So it's going to probably be that actually in the next sort of 18 months to 2 years, Health Education England is going to be part of that wider NHSE. And then we're just going to be the sort of education wing, if you like, for that. But what we do is we fund a lot of, as an organisation, Health Education England fund a lot of doctor training, nurse training, allied health professional training in loads of different ways. We're obviously looking at one section of it with advanced practice, but as things progress, there's going to be enhanced practice, which is that sort of step from newly qualified into advanced, and then moving forward from advanced into consultant practice. And realistically, that's what we're here to do, is we're help to fund and really make sure that the workforce is ready to deal with those population needs. So if you haven't had a look, what I would recommend you to do is to have a look at the Centre for Advancing Practice website. So the Centre for Advancing Practice is the organisation and the team that is just literally there to support all of these areas within advancing practice. So that's just a screenshot of the website. If you were to Google HEE Centre for AP, this is what would come up. And the various tabs that are on the screen there, there's details about accredited courses. I know someone was asking in the chat earlier on about accredited courses. That accreditation's kept up to date, so you'll be able to see whether your course has been accredited or whether it's being submitted at the moment. There's details about credentials, which I'll mention a bit later on. There's all of the details and links to the regional faculties. and we've put in the chat here earlier on regarding our web page to be able to get in contact with us. So feel free at any point if you want to sort of click and have a look, or if you at a later date, if you think, oh, how can I get in touch with the faculty, then you can do that via our regional page. You've also got any resources and news. So what that would be is that if anything new comes up in terms of new documents, new guidance, that's where it will be populated. So as Annabella mentioned, there was the minimum standards of supervision document that came out in June. That was then placed on the resources page. There's also recently in July, the governance matrix, which was published. I'll mention that a bit later on. But again, you can access that via that if you haven't got it in any other way. There's information regarding the e-portfolio route and the supporter portfolio. So in terms of what options are there for people, how to apply, and all the supporting information for that. And then also there's things regarding Advancing Practice Conference. And obviously Annabella's mentioned there that the attendance or the expression of interest has been significant so far. But that would be your main centre. So the centre isn't a physical place. It is just a collection of very intelligent people who get things together and make things happen. And it's a wing of Health Education England. And we'll talk a little bit more as to what we do and how we do it as we progress. So the Centre for Advancing Practice really has that overseeing leadership and strategic view as to how to advance practice. This is all based upon the multi-professional framework, which came out in 2017. But what the centre is really there to do is to quality assure the advanced practice education, the courses that you're doing. And again, I'll mention that in a moment when we're talking about accreditation. But what you can be safe is the fact that the centre is there, and then the regional faculties are there to support you on a more local level to ensure that you're getting good quality education, and therefore you're going to be an experienced, educated, well-trained practitioner to be able to then serve the population. That's really what it's about. And we're really then able to look and understand in the recognition of the skills that you have. Potentially that would be with the e-portfolio route. Again, I'll talk about the different routes in a moment, and be able to sort of endorse credentials, which are sort of specialty units of education, and then really looking regarding skills gaps. So the programme accreditation, the recognition of the practitioner, not necessarily a directory, but having a list of where people are accredited, and that's going to be via a digital badge. Again, I'll mention that in a moment. And then really understand some workforce solutions in terms of the AP toolkit, which is being updated currently. So that has been in existence for a few years. Some of the links don't necessarily work, so we're really looking to see where we can improve and make that fit for purpose. So advanced programme accreditation, and this is really just to understand the process of what happens, and so you can understand in terms of where, for example, any training that you have either currently on or previously done, where it would be, and how you might use alternative methods if your programme hasn't been accredited. So the idea really is HEE are accrediting these programmes in order to actually recognise to get a consistent level of education. What has previously happened before the centre was in fruition is different universities had different courses. There wasn't a standardisation. So, for example, if you were trained up in the northwest and you were maybe trained down in the southeast, is the courses wouldn't always be aligned. The whole point we're doing this is that if you've got that recognition that you are an ACP, you've got your digital badge, is that for public confidence and safety, that they know that if you've got that digital badge, that you've achieved a certain level of education. It's that quality, it's that kite mark. And realistically, this is what we're always talking about. It's the fact that if you had your mum, your dad, a family member that went to see an advanced practitioner, that they would be able to have the confidence that they, they really know what they're talking about. They have their governance surrounding them. They know that they're experts in their particular field and understand the way the wider workforce works across the NHS in order to get the best care in the right time from the right clinician. So the programmes are what's called mapped to the multi-professional framework and the standards of education and training. So there is a centre there's a centre accreditation team, and what they do is they are solely there to be able to monitor and understand the standards of the training that's given. They'll identify and look about making sure that every university that offers the programme is multi-professional, and it has a number of different options of where people can go. but actually there is those core capabilities that are the same throughout every practitioner, so that your training is to the same level, and we call it sort of level 7. So that's kind of master's level training, and this is what the centre's there to accredit. So there are 6 stages really in terms of the accreditation. So what happens with this is for us as a regional faculty and myself as the supervision and assessment lead, we make contact with the ACP program leads. We're having good connections with all of those. We have regular meetings. And then what we do is we agree a submission date. So that's just an agreed amount of time with the Centre for Advancing Practice of when they're going to submit all their documentation. There is a vast number, several hundred programs that run across the country. So realistically, with the centre only really being in existence for the last couple of years, we're getting through all of that, which is why all the programs haven't been accredited to date. But we're firmly assured that actually, really by the end of next year, we should have the opportunity to have accredited all of them. Certainly within the Northwest, we're doing well here, and we're actually able to make sure that all of our courses that were offered within the Northwest should be accredited as far as we're concerned. So what happens then is us as a faculty, we would then support the submitting university, help them with their submission, maybe go through any advice, talk about what's required. They would then submit their documents as to their mapping documents, and then provide evidence as to how they've achieved these sort of objectives. And there's a lot of different objectives that come through. When that's submitted, that's then submitted to us as a faculty for what's called an integrity check. So myself and the team with Liam and Kath, what we then do is check all the links work, check the evidence is there, and making sure that it's all a smooth process. That then gets, once we've accepted that, there sometimes are a few minor amendments, purely links that don't work, that then gets sent back to the centre for that standards review. So that's then within the centre, the review of all the documents to make sure that it satisfies all the criteria that are required for the multi-professional framework and the SETS document. That then goes to an independent panel review, a bit like a third party having a looking at it to make sure that everything's fair and that it's not going to be a bias towards anyone who's either assessing it that has any connection with any of the universities. And then from there, once it's been independently reviewed, then the university are notified and the final processes. Then there's a document that gets set out with recommendations or any conditions that need to be met, or any commendations where a university has done particularly well, and then they're able to share that. And what that would mean is if the university is accredited and the course is accredited, on completion and qualification of your course, you would then be eligible for the digital badge. Again, I'll speak about that in a moment. So the accreditation is linking to the validation date, and this is where sometimes people understand as to when certain courses are validated to. So what a validation date means is the fact that actually the course itself runs in a certain pattern, if you like. So what happens is the course is accredited, that it's up to the required standard and it is delivering what it's going to do. What happens sometimes over time is when things are revalidated, adaptations and edits are made to the program, and as a result, then, if you like, the same course isn't delivered the next validation date. So the accreditation is always going back to that validation date because we know then it's been consistent. Accreditation usually will be lasting 5 years. And as far as that's concerned, what we're trying to work towards as this is evolving, we'll hopefully try and work towards with the accreditation team that the accreditation and the validation dates will be a similar time of the year, so that everything ties in together. At the moment, we're sort of addressing that backlog more than anything else. And then what happens is, within the faculty, within the regional faculty, I will do some annual quality monitoring with each university. So what that would mean is every year, once it's been accredited, that it's that opportunity then just to make sure that nothing's changed since the last validation date or the last accreditation, and therefore that the students that are starting on the next year are going to get exactly the same level of training at the previous year, again to maintain consistency and ensure that there's that quality of delivery every year. What would happen is if, for example, the course changed mid-year, we would need to be able to be aware of that. And then is that still eligible for the accreditation? Is it still at the right level? Is it something that's changed? And therefore we'd be informed just to be able to work with the university to ensure that things get back up to the required standard. As with any job, people leave, program leads change, teaching teams change. So we're just making sure that whatever happens within a university, you as a trainee are still going to be getting a consistent level. Now, legacy submissions are going to be slightly tricky at times, and this is the questions, and I see one of the questions in the chat. What happens with this is if a program, in essence, hasn't changed the teaching and the level of assessment for a number of years, then the accreditation team will look back and say, when was the last time the program changed? So you'll see some universities going back previous and prior to 2017. Because if the university has delivered a consistent program and can evidence this over a number of years, then it can go back, several years. We have one going back to 2017 in the region, to 2012. What I would say with that, though, is a lot of the time, as things, and particularly the multi-professional framework coming in 2017, that was a major change where some courses were up the right standard and some weren't. So what there's needed to be able to map against that document, some courses don't go back beyond 2017. Some of them even recently have needed to change to be able to make sure that they're eligible for accreditation. So there are changes happening and we will keep people informed. But as we say, this is where if you wanted to have a look at whether your course is accredited and whether it's got any legacy, that would be through the main Centre for Advancing Practice website. Please feel free. I'll get my contact details at the end. If you have any questions, absolutely contact me and we'll talk about that individually rather than going through all of the chat in here. But if you have any questions, I'll give my email address. I'm happy to answer any questions as to which ones are accredited, which ones aren't, when the submission dates are for in the Northwest, and whether there's a legacy anticipated. We have all that information. I won't share it widely because from my point of view, it's more a question of universities getting themselves sorted. So in the Northwest, we now have 4 programs accredited. We have 2 that have been submitted that are in the process of obtaining their answers. And then we have dates set or reviews for the other programs within the next year to 18 months. So what I would say is hopefully by the end of next year, all of the 10 universities are going to have accredited courses within the Northwest. We're working with 2 courses that are in the Northeast and Yorkshire region in terms of specialties within Sheffield Hallam as well, which again, hopefully you'll be able to see those because they'll be on the university drop-in sessions. We've got people from Sheffield Hallam for the 2 special pathways there. But what we're able to do then is there's a large range of courses available. There is the generic ACP program, but there are universities offering specialist pathways. And again, a lot of that information is going to be on our website or on those expression of interest forms when it next gets released. So there's loads of information, or if you've got any questions, feel free to come back to us and we'll be able to talk you through them. So really what it's about, this is about the qualifying and having that digital badge to show that there's that quality assurance. So what you'd get is it's a verification of you've completed an HEE accredited program. So it's a method of demonstrating your competence. Or it's about the verification of the prior learning via the e-portfolio. Again, I'll talk about the different routes into getting the validation in a moment. But the idea is that once you've proven that you are at the required level, this is just a mock-up. This is not necessarily what it's going to look at, but you get a digital link that you'll be able to add to an email signature. And it will look something like this on the screen. So what there'll be is there'll be a symbol, there will be some sort of recognition of what's going on, and then there'll be a little sort of click link. What that'll enable people to do is to click that link, and then there won't be a lot of personal data on it, but it will basically say which course you did and what year. That will give people the confidence that actually you've achieved that right level of education and training and experience, and that then people be able to go, okay, they are an expert in their field, they are at that advanced practice level. And what we would be encouraging is the consistency is it's not just a case of, right, I've done my master's qualification, that's it. We're then wanting to demonstrate through ongoing supervision and support that you can evidence the 4 pillars consistently and across all of the different pillars all the time. And that's really the difference. It's not just a simple thing of I'm going to collect my certificate. It's actually living and breathing those high quality standards across that master's level, across all 4 pillars consistently. So that's the kind of thing you'd get. If, for example, you change job, this is another way for employers to be able to say, OK, I'm Nick Worth, I'm an advanced practitioner. My employer would go, is he? And then I can check, they can click that link and then the information would come up. But it doesn't have a lot of other personal information involved. So it's not going to be sharing personal data across to people that you wouldn't want it to be. It's more just showing that you are at the right level of education. So what's it all about? And one of the things that people have often asked about, why should I do it and what's going to happen? And I think one of the key factors for me is the multi-professional framework for clinical practice. This is always about patient safety. When people have found that they're finding things a bit stressful and really difficult at times, why am I putting myself through it? This is about being able to demonstrate that you are at advanced practice level, that you are master's level, you have that breadth of knowledge and experience to be able to help people. Like I said earlier on, if your mum, dad, son, daughter went to go and see an advanced practitioner, you as a person would be able to go, if they've got that digital badge, I've got that level of faith and support that they're actually competent and capable in their job, and they're regularly monitored to be able to maintain that, rather than doing something many years ago and then things change and they don't keep up to date. It's supporting the whole healthcare workforce. I think one of the questions that often gets levied is the fact that it's about a cheaper way of getting medics. And whilst there is a cost effectiveness and being able to deal with the population need, this is about a patient seeing the right clinician at the right time for the right patient. So what would happen is if someone comes in that actually you as an advanced clinical practitioner, whatever specialty area you work in, you may be the more appropriate clinician to deal with that patient. If, for example, there's something that you're not happy about or you feel that it sits outside your scope of practice, you would also have the experience and capability to know where to pass that patient on to. Is there a particular pathway to put them on? Is there tests that might be either blood test, scanning, whatever that may be, or that might be that they do need to see a medical consultant at that point. And what they'll be able to do, you might just hand someone to a different ACP, but it's about understanding and having that breadth of knowledge. So it's the right clinician at the right time. That's what's key. And the other thing really is that advanced practice isn't for everyone. Not everyone can do it and not everyone should do it. This is about a development opportunity so an individual can demonstrate their capability, but also it's about developing the service need. Not every service needs everyone to be a leader. There needs to be people at maybe a less experienced level, maybe enhanced level or newly qualified to kind of do the work. The advanced practitioners hopefully will be those senior leaders within a department being able to maybe do all of the other 4 pillars, not just the clinical part, but the leadership, the education and research. And that's really what we're trying to establish. So it isn't for everyone. It doesn't feel that it should be compulsory to anyone. It's if it's appropriate, if it's dealing with the service needs of your department and the population needs of wherever you work. It doesn't matter whether it's primary care, secondary care, any specialty area. So Annabella's introduced us as a faculty before. I'm not necessarily going to go through us again, but also then again, just to make sure that you're all aware of the TPDs. I will be putting their details up a bit later on in the chat as well, just if you haven't got the time to scribble down their contact details. But the TPDs are our specialty advisors. So as you can see, the different areas that they are, and I know people are starting to question about which session to join in with the next time for the breakout sessions, and they're all doing projects. And what those projects are doing is they're looking at a particular area within their specialty that would enhance the support and the learning that an ACP trainee is getting, and understanding that where we can improve things, and that whole package of support that we can offer as a faculty within each specialty area. So feel free to get in touch with those. Like we say, the breakout sessions are more or less formal. It gives you an opportunity to ask a direct question, to have a conversation, to find out a little as to what's going on. So yeah, have a look at those different areas. And as we said before, at the end of the session here, the links will be shared so that people can know which room to go into. So the different routes into advanced clinical practice. So we've got the apprenticeship, the fees funded, and then the roadmap, which is within primary care and the e-portfolio in a different colour because they're a slightly different pathway. So you have the apprenticeship, which will either be 2 or 3 years. As part of the apprenticeship, which is kind of a government funded scheme, rules are slightly different. So there is a requirement to have maths and English at a certain level, which sometimes may be challenging for some individuals. So that can sometimes be a barrier, and there is an endpoint assessment. So there's almost like a final exam at the end that's slightly different. But the benefits of the apprenticeship is there's more funding available for, if you like, supervision and sort of non-patient facing work and support. So whereas in the fees funded, we're sort of saying that there's an hour of supervision a week, within the fees funded, there's 20% of your time as part of an apprenticeship that is particularly sort of non-work facing, so that you're able to do either study time, supervision, support, observations, whatever that may be. So again, fees funded is what we would be able to do as a faculty. We would then support when people apply for funding. We would then support either an apprenticeship or fees funded. Again, we would help to work with your employer, your ACP lead within your trust to establish which pathway was more appropriate for you, or which supported the work that you would do. And this is where it's important in an engagement event like this. If you're looking at different courses, spend time to go into the HEI rooms and drop in, ask questions. Whilst the courses are all of an equivalent level in terms of the accreditation, some teaching teams have certain specialty areas. Some people just might even be as simple as some do their 1 day a week on a Monday and some do them on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, and it might suit your working. We have one program within the Northwest that's entirely online. So look around and shop around to see what's fit. With the roadmap, that's for primary care. There's been a certain number of these roadmaps allowed, and again, I won't go into detail with that. But previously, there was sort of publication that they were going to be going from what's called stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, which was advanced clinical practice. That's in the process of being evolved at the moment, and the direct route into advanced practice is going to be changed because the consistency of learning was slightly questioned. So whilst if you are looking to do the roadmap and going along that line, the e-portfolio may be a more appropriate route to get your digital badge. The FCP, the first contact practitioner, will probably sit within enhanced practice, although that's not confirmed. So that would take you to FCP for those that are in that primary care setting. The e-portfolio is an opportunity for people to, if you like, gain recognition for the prior learning and prior experience that people may have. It's not a quick backhanded route to getting through. What you'd need to evidence with an e-portfolio route would be that actually you'd need to be able to submit that you've done a number of maybe master's modules or master's level learning that would evidence your educational aspect, and then be able to evidence that with reflections, maybe clinical observation tools, work-based placement learning assessments, those types of things. So it's a way of, if you like, well, now that the faculty and now that the centre is in existence, we're saying those practitioners who've been doing a great job for so many years, rather than having to go through a whole new programme for 2 or 3 years, it's saying actually we're giving people that recognition. The second cohort is in the process. The expressions of interest were just published recently, but that's not the full application process. That will be coming out soon, and there's thought that there's going to be a third cohort. It's not going to go on forever, so if you're not sure about it, then it's worth sort of making contact and maybe applying, and you can find out whether you're eligible, again, by going on the website. What that would do with that is if you're accepted onto the programme, there are certain criteria. Again, I'm not going to go into detail here, but you would have a learning needs analysis that would be virtual with a university. It may not be within our region. They would then establish whether you are eligible to complete the e-portfolio. Have you got the required learning? If there's only a slight shortfall, so 1 module's worth or less, then they will help to support you to gain the extra module. If you need more than that 1 module, you would drop out of the process and then be pointed towards either a fees funded or apprenticeship route. If you're ready to go and all of your data, all of your information is ready, you've got the right certificates, you've got the right evidence, they will help coach you through giving the right number of reflections so that it would be academically rigorous, that people can look at it and go, yes, they're fit for to be able to be an ACP. So that's the kind of explaining the different routes. So usually for the apprenticeship and fees funded, there'd be an expression of interest by the faculty. So within the Northwest, that's what we do. Annabella and Deborah run that process in terms of getting the expressions of interest. So that's directed to us. And part of what we ask here is these readiness checklists. What these are a way of each individual employer understanding the responsibility and what's required to support an individual going through a program. Doing an ACP in a master's program is tough. So you need to know that there's the right support in place, the right supervision in place, you have a job plan, the fact that you're actually going to progress through your career. It's not just a little brief CPD area that you can just drop in and drop out of. A 2 or 3 year master's program is tough. Master's level learning is that balance between your family life, your working life, and then your study life, and trying to juggle all of that is really tough sometimes. So this shouldn't be entered into lightly, but it's the opportunity of making sure that you have all the infrastructure around you to be successful. That's the whole point. There's no point in starting a program not sure whether you've got a supervisor, and 6 months in you're then scrabbling around. What we're trying to do is make sure that all the building blocks are there to enable you to be successful. So you have a job plan so that you have a trainee job description, and then you're going to be able to then work your way through, and then post qualification you're going to hopefully have moved on so that you're not doing the same job that you were prior to going through your qualification. The idea is you're an evolved person, you've got that experience and that education that will take you on to be able to have a much wider job plan, and that's what we're there to support. And it's about the population needs. Not everyone needs to be an ACP. So understanding that and working with your employers and your ACP leads, that's really important. And so it's that progression really from the trainee into an advanced practitioner, and then what goes on beyond there is really important. Credentials are these sort of units of learning. Again, I'll be talking a bit more about that later on, about being a specialty area of learning. So what you might do is you might add a credential into your current learning, or sometimes as they evolve, they may be incorporated into a training program to give you a sort of a specialty pathway. So that might be in a lot of the different areas, and there's about 50 of them in progress at the moment, and I'll name a few of those a bit later on. So the idea is there are a number of routes, and it's about what suits you as an individual, what suits your employer and the role you're working in. And just because an employer has always used one university, what I would now be saying and encouraging people is there is choice. There is a slight difference between universities. Find out what suits you, find out what suits your service need, find out if there's a particular specialty route that would be appropriate for you, and then understand. So the more you're informed, the more you can get on a program that you can work with and be successful at, because that's really what we'd like you to do. We'd like you to go through your program, enjoying every step of the way, getting the right support, and then being a well qualified, experienced practitioner at the end of it. So this is where the drop-in sessions here with the HEIs are really useful to be able to understand the difference between one university and another. So what are we doing as a faculty to actually support you? So as we mentioned, the TPD projects, what they're looking for is they're trying to establish where there may be either deficiencies or areas of growth or development that we as a faculty can work on in the next year. The TPDs realistically are kind of about 8 or 9 months through their sort of working contract, and we're having an end of year sort of celebration in February of where they're presenting their projects. And what we'll be also doing is publishing a synopsis of their projects on our website from February onwards. So that's an opportunity for everyone to be able to share the knowledge, and we'd really like to be able to get people to understand what's going on and maybe take some of that knowledge and experience back into the workplace so that people can end up by finding out, how can I make things better? How can I support other members of staff? How can I support trainees? And if you want to find out a little more about the TPD's projects, obviously the next section within the breakout rooms is going to be important. So we're in contact with all of the trust and ICS ACP leads. So we have the details of those. If you don't know your ACP lead within an organisation, what I would do is I would first of all ask around, find out what goes on. Sometimes we found that an ACP lead has some information, and it's actually the internal processes about the messages don't get down to the right people all the time. So I would really make friends with your ACP lead, or if you can't get one within your organisation, there are ICS trust ACP leads, Again, they'll have a wealth of information, and will also know the timings of when there might be applications of the expressions of interest for future kind of cohorts. So if you're someone that's thinking of doing an ACP course, first of all, ask around in your trust or your PCN if you're in primary care. If not, you've got your ICS leads, or if failing that, you can always contact us at the faculty, and we'll hope you put in touch with the right person. So we're here to sort of give national and regional updates. Again, that can come through our website. We have a newsletter that would come out once a month that we keep up to date if there are developments, if there's new guidelines, or if there's new sort of structures that are happening, and we'll keep people informed as to whether the e-portfolio is going to be running in subsequent years, whether there's something new and different that comes on. So those are really important to be able to sort of keep in touch with. So again, we'll be able to, we'll have the sign up database form a bit later on. We're working at the moment to improve supervision resources, and again, I'll talk about this one a bit later on in the breakout session. But realistically, the challenge has been is that supervisors only have to be appropriately trained. And realistically, there's no general standard. And so what we're here to do as a faculty is trying to address some of that to maintain that we'll get some support. So it'll be coming out in the new year. There'll be a 2-day course that's going to be free for people to attend. And we want people also to have an opportunity of sharing best practice examples, what's gone well, being able to have an interactive part of the course so that people understand what good supervision looks like, and maybe telling stories of where it's not been so good and what we can do to support that. We need it to be effective and really support every different specialty area, whether primary care, secondary care, whether you're in community, whatever that may be, to work together to try and ensure the level of support that individuals get in supervision is of a high quality and actually is fit for purpose in terms of the work that's being done out on the ground. And I mentioned again just for the faculty newsletter, so once a month, Kath and Liam put that together, and they'll be able to publish that so that any details of any updates is coming through. And then we have engagement events like this. So obviously this is an opportunity to showcase what we do in the Northwest and identify what the TPDs and the support are being created. We share conferences that are run from different organisations. That might be trust-wide, it might be ACS-wide, it may be different universities that are running different conferences. So if you're actually signed up to our newsletter, you may hear about these things that are happening in your region, that without that, you know, what I would always say is there are loads and hundreds of ACPs within the region. Although you may be working in isolation, there's a lot of support available for you. If you just if you're feeling slightly lost and not sure where to go, contact us at the faculty and we'll be able to help you out. And then we have sort of the various ACP networks. Some of those networks have been set up by the TPDs and some of them are already existing, and we're trying to find out more about that. So again, if you're not sure about where to go, feel free to get in contact with us and we'll be able to share all those contact details. So credentials. Credentials are a bit of a tricky area because it's a word that sort of gets thrown around a little bit without necessarily having a great deal of understanding of what goes on. The word credential is that unit of learning that isn't necessarily going to be uniform. So for example, if you have master's credits, you might do a master's credit that's 10 units, 10 credits or 20 credits or 30 credit module. Credentials don't fit into that. So there's no one specific. It's not a certain number of days training. But what it is it's enabling to be able to understand that if you've done a credential, you have a bit of specialty knowledge that gives you that extra sort of area of workplace specialty. So there's about 50 in progress at the moment, but these ones that are on the screen at the moment are the ones that kind of fairly well progressed. And again, as we're still learning how they're going to be integrated, it may be that in the future they're integrated into a generic ACP program, but then offering a particular pathway. So for example, you may come out at the end of it with being an ACP with some form of specialist pathway, whether that's a bracketed award, whether that's a named award. Again, we're waiting and seeing. It may be something that you do a generic ACP course and then your credential is your add-on or your bolt-on at the end that then creates that extra little bit to say, okay, I have an expertise in end-of-life care, for example. So these credentials, as they become validated and are shared, and which universities are doing which ones, what we'll then be able to do is we'll be able to publish and support that. So at the moment, it's still in progress. We've spoken to the universities within the Northwest, and people are looking at which ones they may choose to support. It's not ready to go yet, but again, it's a kind of word that's being bandied around. So hopefully that explains a little bit. There's definitely a little bit of chopping and changing as to what might happen before it's completed. The final bit from me really in terms of what we're talking about here, again, that people are aware of, is this governance matrix. So this is the web page that's from the centre website. So again, as we've mentioned before, you could just Google it. And what that will do, this is under the resources and events. The governance matrix now has been shared across all of the ACP leads in the trusts. It's a start point, so it's not a final piece of work. But what this is a national document that will help support the quality of advanced clinical practice, not just in training, but what's actually working in an organisation. So there are loads of areas of how people can self-assess. And it may be that in the future, myself as a supervision and assessment lead and us as a faculty may come out to employers and individuals to understand where they are in this maturity matrix and understand where they may need a bit of extra support. Again, just like we say, there are personnel changes. So an AP lead who's been brilliant at one point may move on to a future job, and then a less experienced practitioner comes in and then they reassess it. They have a different view on where the governance matrix is. And again, if there are areas that they need support, they can reach out to the faculty and we can work with them. So this is quite an interactive, you download it and it's an interactive kind of Excel spreadsheet, but these are the areas that's covered. And this is a way of, if you like, monitoring and gauging how mature you are in any organisation. This is slightly more secondary care focused, but it can be used within a primary care setting. There'll be sections that maybe you go, OK, I wouldn't necessarily see it in this way, but we can change it. And as things evolve, there'll be more resources that are added to it, or, for example, good best practice examples. So we're really on about the governance of it, the leadership. So in terms of, work-based effectiveness, is the director of nursing, are the medical directors on board with advanced practice, that it's part of that workforce building, that there's training and assessment, there's a quality there, there's clinical support, there's supervision across all of the 4 pillars. And actually that continuing development post-qualification for advanced clinical practitioners. Prior to this, there wasn't really anything there. So what we're trying to do now is trying to establish to make sure that at every step of the way there is good governance in place. And where there are areas where some individual organisations aren't as mature, or will be able to help support them to improve that over time. It's going to take a long time to develop that. So what next in terms of post-qualification? Really what we're trying to work towards is the fact that there will be a development or an evolution of job or banding. So once you've moved from your training position as an ACP, that you would then go on to being maybe a band up. It's very difficult because we can't insist on that within Health Education England, because your employer is your employer. But what we would look towards doing is sort of maybe coming in at training at sort of band 7 and potentially moving on to a band 8. But I'm really hesitant to suggest that that's going to be essential. But understanding that your job plan and your work changes as you are doing your training and as you go through to post-qualification. So understanding that evolution, that you're able to evidence continual competency. So it's not just enough to say, I've got my certificate, that's it. How do you evidence that on a consistent basis? So it's about what ongoing supervision and support is required. So training time from your normal job that is non-patient facing or non-clinical, to be able to then have that ongoing support. That support and supervision and regular training is vitally important, but it's not always included in nursing and allied health professionals contracts, but it's something that we need to evolve, and that's what we're trying to start. There's likely to be regulation coming in a few years' time, so we're working with that to understand where the regulators is changing, and again we'll keep abreast of what's happening with that so that people can understand what's required to be able to maintain their regulation. And it's about making sure that it's across the 4 pillars. Realistically here, we're on that culture shift. So we're a bit like the digger going through with the Ever Given that was stuck in the Suez Canal a couple of years ago. At the moment, we're at the start of our journey here with advanced practice, and the faculty's here just chipping away, trying to make a difference, trying to get things moving. So things will take a little bit of time. There will be some bumps in the road occasionally as we get things going, but feel free at any point to come back to us for any details, and we'll keep you understanding of what's going on. Like we've said, the next survey opens on the 18th of October, so there'll be loads more coming out. There's been some stuff that's come out on Twitter from Health Education England today. We'll be sharing things over the next few weeks and trying to encourage many people to come. The point is if you are in training, the next survey is an opportunity to have your say as to how the training is going, particularly in terms of placements, and then we're able to adapt and improve them again, make sure and ensure standards are high. As Annabelle has mentioned, there's the Advanced Practice Week, which is the 7th and 10th of November. We've got some specific Northwest-based sessions, so have a look at those, and again, we'll advertise them. Any questions at all, my details are there in terms of either my email address or Twitter handle. If anyone wants to get in touch, you can email the faculty, and again, feel free to join in with any of the TPDs, and you've got the HEI drop-in sessions.